How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of Infinite Sports. I'm your host, Kenneth Grunfelder. We're going to talk about a topic a little bit different from the Yankees, a non baseball topic, and we're going to talk about the NFL draft, and more specifically, Shedeur Sanders, which was the main storyline of this past NFL draft. And I definitely want to talk about, because I'm a Giants fan, I want to get into their draft at some point. We'll do a video on that. But I did want to talk about this just because, like I said, this was the main storyline of the draft, and I wanted to give you guys my thoughts on it. So, Shedeur Sanders, going into the draft, leading up to the draft, he was looked at as one of the top quarterbacks that was going to be taken off the board. At first, it looked like he was going to be a first round pick, even a top three pick, because the three teams that were picking in the top three all needed quarterbacks. And then as we got closer and closer to the draft, it started to seem like teams like the Browns and the Giants, who were picking at 2 and 3, were going to look and take best player available. And Shedeur Sanders was going to fall out of the top three. And, all of us were looking at, the potential landing spots for him after the top three. I had him going to the Saints in the top 10. That ended up not happening. And then it was like, well, where is he going to end up if it's now he falls out of the top 10? Well, could he be in the second round? Then he fell, went past the second round. And it just kept going and going and going and going. And then he ended up getting taken in the fifth round. So it's amazing how he went from a top three pick to ending up in the fifth round. He got taken by the Browns. And there's a lot of stuff that we can get into. He didn't interview well. He had an interview with the Giants that didn't go well. Brian Dable and him, it didn't really. Something went on there. They had an install package, and it seemed like he wasn't prepared to answer questions and things like that. And Brian Dable didn't like it, and I guess Shedeur didn't react well to it either. So there was that. And, some of his other interviews as well. I know there was a clip of an interview. And I guess, some people may have taken his response to a question the wrong way, about turning around a franchise. But I think one of the main things as to why he fell is, because of who his dad is, Deion Sanders. And you go back to an interview that Deion had on a podcast, and he talked about how, he could control where Shedeur ends up going. And it could be another Eli Manning situation. And we all know what happened there. He got drafted by the Chargers. The Giants drafted Phillip Rivers. They did a swap. And look how both of those careers played out. But teams didn't want to have to deal with that. And I know everybody has their different theories and speculations on it. But going into this draft, let's be honest. Did we think that this quarterback class was loaded? No, we didn't. We knew Cam Ward was probably going to be the first pick. And then after that, we'll have to wait and see. For some of us, I know some of my friends, they would have said that all these quarterbacks could have been taken in the second round and beyond that. None of these quarterbacks are really worth the first round pick, but because you have teams like the Titans and the Giants and the Browns that needed quarterbacks, we ended up seeing two quarterbacks taken in the first round, just not the two that I guess we all initially expected. But Cam Ward was definitely the sure first quarterback, first round pick when it comes to that position. That's what ended up happening. And then after that, we saw Jackson Dart get taken in the first round. So, there was kind of a difference of opinion between, the evaluators, myself, people that host podcasts and radio shows, and obviously, the NFL, the teams in the NFL, how they viewed these quarterbacks. Now, for me personally, I think Shedeur should have been taken at least a little bit before the fifth round. I think, if he falls out of the first round, I thought, the second round maybe, and then he fell, and then he just kept falling, and then he went to the fifth round. To me, I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I'm an expert when it comes to college football, but I think maybe Shedeur should have been taken a little bit sooner than the fifth round. That's just my opinion, but I understand why he fell. And when I look at Shedeur Sanders, again, not saying I'm an expert when it comes to college football. I don't see a generational talent. So you could look at that, and NFL teams looked at that and say, hey, we can wait. And eventually, if he falls to us at a certain point and we feel like this is the right spot to take him, we'll take him. And that's what the Browns did. Now, we'll get into the Browns quarterback situation in a second. But I think there's a lot that went into this. It's, I guess the baggage that he brings with Deion being his dad. Deion Sanders obviously was a generational talent. His son is not. Travis Hunter, we could say, is a generational talent at his position because he could play, both corner and receiver at a high level. So that's why he was taken in the top 3 from Colorado. But yeah, there's a lot that went into this. And also, I wanted to bring up the prank calling incident. So Jeff Ulbricht's son got a hold of Shedeur's phone number because of an open iPad, and they posted it on social media, and it went viral. And now the Falcons, they were fined $250K, and Jeff Ulbricht was fined $100K for this incident. Now, this is not the first time that a prospect has been prank called. This has happened before. But, this was done, and it's, what are you thinking, though? Posting it on social media, I guess, you didn't expect the repercussions, but you could have cost your father his job. And how about Jeff Ulbricht? He goes from being the defensive coordinator with the Jets, he becomes the head coach of the Jets, and it was a disaster. And then he goes to the Falcons, a new job, help a defense that really needs it, and then this happens. So yeah, it's definitely a weird, not an uncomfortable spot when you're at the dinner table in the Ulbricht house. But I wanted to bring that up as well. But yeah, there was just a lot that went on with this draft with Shedeur, and that's all they talked about was Shedeur Sanders. And that was one of the main reasons why I was still tuning into the draft every day, because I wanted to see where he ended up. And I actually ended up missing where he got picked, because I guess I was watching something else, and I ended up turning away from the draft, and he ended up getting taken by the Browns in the 5th round. But let's talk about the Browns quarterback situation. So Shedeur Sanders now steps into a quarterback room where you have Joe Flacco, you have Kenny Pickett, who they traded for this offseason. They did a swap. They traded DTR to the Eagles, and the Browns got Kenny Pickett. Joe Flacco was there a couple years ago. He took the Browns on that magic carpet ride to the playoffs. They ended up losing, but the Browns maybe should have held on to Flacco, but they didn't. But now he's back. So you got Flacco, you got Kenny Pickett, who's familiar with the AFC North. He was with the Steelers, of course. The Steelers drafted him, but then, he's traded to the Eagles, and now he's traded back into the division now with the Browns. But they also took Dillon Gabriel, the quarterback out of Oregon, who's coming off of a very good year in his final year with the Ducks. So you got those guys. Deshaun Watson is going to be a non-factor. And then you have Shedeur Sanders now. There is no reason to me why Shedeur Sanders can't compete, come into that situation, compete, and earn a roster spot, because that's what he's going to have to do. I think he could definitely do that. Now, when I look at the other quarterbacks, I think Joe Flacco, to me, personally, is a guarantee to make the roster because of his veteran status. Now, you could say, well, Kenny Pickett is also a veteran, but I think Kenny Pickett's going to have to earn his roster spot too. I think he's going to have to come in and earn it. Dillon Gabriel, it's an interesting conversation because they did take him in the 3rd round. So they want to look at him and say, hey, this guy deserves to be on this team. We drafted him, one of our top 3 draft choices in terms of where they were taken. You want to say, hey, this guy deserves a roster spot. So to me, I think it's going to come down to Shedeur Sanders and Kenny Pickett, in my opinion, as to who makes that final spot. And to me, I don't think there's any reason why Shedeur Sanders can't come in and win that roster spot, and then Kenny Pickett's the odd man out. That's how I see it. Now, could it be, well, Joe Flacco is, on the older side, and could he be on the way out? I guess, but I don't know. To me, I think Flacco, he's going to be on this team regardless, and I think it's going to come down to Shedeur and Kenny Pickett for that final spot. And, a lot of people look at Shedeur. They think everything was handed down to him. His father and him, they were at Jackson State. He was the quarterback there. They go to Colorado. He was the quarterback at Colorado. Has his jersey retired, his number retired, along with Travis Hunter, even though they were there briefly. They want to see Shedeur try to earn this. And let's see. Let's see how he responds to it. And you know what? When he got drafted, he was very happy, very emotional about it. He just wants the opportunity. That's how I looked at it. He wants the opportunity. He didn't care where he was drafted. I mean, he wasn't miserable when he got drafted because, he fell to the 5th round. No, he's ready for the opportunity. And I think he's in a good situation because this is kind of an open competition. There's no guarantee as to who's going to be the starter week 1 for the Browns. If Shedeur does really well, from OTAs to training camp to preseason, maybe he won't be the starter, but he'll at least get a spot, but he is going to have an opportunity to try and earn this job. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you who I think is going to get the job because, it's May 1st. Happy first day of May, by the way. But he's going to earn the opportunity to compete, and I think, he's going to do the best he can. So, but yeah, it was definitely surprising that he fell as far as he did. But it does make sense. I mean, also, from Sports Talk Radio in the New York area, Boomer Esiason was talking about how, NFL teams were advised to take him off of their draft boards. And that goes back to what I was saying before with the baggage. But look, there are prospects that get drafted into the NFL that come in with baggage. And if you have the talent, NFL teams are not going to care about that. If you can help them win football games, they're going to bring you in. Now, we'll see what happens. But, look, like I said, I think Shedeur's going to come in and he's going to compete. And we'll see what happens. But that's my thoughts on the Shedeur Sanders situation. And also, one of the other things I wanted to bring up, there was those videos that surfaced with him and Cam Ward working out together. And, the different mindsets. Because Shedeur also has, a little bit of a music career. And he was talking to Cam Ward about, doing a song together. And Cam Ward's like, no, I'm focused on football. You could also look at that. And some people would say, does Shedeur really want this? Well, again, he's going to go out and try to show it. Trying to earn a spot with the Browns. But that's a video that a lot of people will go back to in a few years and see where these two guys are at in their careers. But that was also something else that, I wanted to bring up. But let me know what you guys think about the Shedeur Sanders situation because it is very fascinating because I don't think we've seen something like this before. Again, at least from my time watching football, I haven't seen something like this. Where a prospect goes from being a top 3 pick, now all of a sudden he goes all the way down to the 5th round. And, not injury concerns or anything, but it's just, some of the other things that are going on around the prospect. But let me know what you guys think, though. So, like I said, we'll talk about, the Giants. I wanted to talk about their draft. At some point we'll do a video on that. We'll get into some other stuff as well. The NBA playoffs are still going on. The first round is nearing the end. So, we're going to talk about the Knicks. They have a game tonight against the Pistons, so we'll get into that. Tomorrow, maybe I'll do a video on that. But look out for another Yankees recap video. That'll be coming up. That'll be coming out shortly. Be working on that. But make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And I will talk to you guys next time. Take care.